Yo, what's going on, people? It's your boy 8Poncho, back at you again with another video. So I'm pretty sure it's common knowledge by now that in recent years we've seen a bigger armed police presence on the streets of the UK. Now this is obviously due to a rise in gun and knife crime, but also due to terror attacks, we've seen police forces recruit more armed officers. Now I remember seeing a debate, I believe, after one of the recent terror attacks saying that all police in the UK should be armed as it's getting more dangerous for the police to enforce the law. Now in my opinion, I feel like not all police should be armed because there is petty criminals out there who don't really pose a threat to anyone. And it's a bit of a controversial topic because I do think as much as the UK police aren't as trigger happy as American police, we could see one day, if all officers ended up being armed, that more unneeded shootings might happen on civilians. Also, this applies to stun guns because these can also be deadly and actually people have died from them in the past. Now I seen a BBC article where it reported that in August of 2019, Northamptonshire police announced that all frontline officers were to be armed with electric stun guns, and this was the first police force in the country to apply these rules. Now in America, I understand that police have to be armed because, as most of you will probably know, the citizens are also armed because in most states in America it's actually legal to carry firearms. But here in the UK, with our strict gun laws, I think it would be unfair for all police to be armed with firearms and stun guns because the majority of people don't have access to legal firearms, and even with a license you can't just wander about on the street with it. But for you guys that didn't know, if you own a legal firearm in the UK and say for example somebody comes to burgle your house and you actually shoot them and kill them, a lot of the times people don't even get charged with murder. Sometimes they get charged with manslaughter, and sometimes a case isn't even brought against them and they've legally killed someone under self-defense laws. Now with that being said, some of you guys might say, well, normal civilians won't go around committing crimes, but it's not the point. If all police are allowed to be armed with firearms, then shouldn't all citizens be allowed to carry firearms? But again, it is a controversial topic. Some people will agree, some people will disagree. Now even though I've said my opinion that I don't feel like all police should be armed, and I know a lot of you probably will agree with what I'm saying, I just want you to take a look at this video and tell me if you think in these types of situations it would be better if the police were armed with some kind of firearm.
That's alright. We need to speak to you a sec, pal. We need to speak on the door.
Jan, we can help you, mate.
Right, let's get this.
Whoa! Now get away! The rate from officer was here as a male with a knife here. Get away from me! I've told you once, get away! What are you doing? Whoa now! Yeah! Pack it in! Get away from me now! Put the knife down! Now! Down, can you... Anyway, put the knife down! Okay, he's got a knife on him! Put the knife down! I told you once! Put the knife down! Put the knife down!
You wanna see?
Put the... I told you once, put the knife down! Put the knife down! Don't take another step towards me! Not take another step towards me! Get away from me! Get away from me!
Do you wanna see?
Get away! Get away!
Space.
On the 15th of March 2020, police officers PC Hannah Jones and PC Justin Harold were dispatched to a routine noisy neighbour call and, in their own words, had no reason to believe there would be any heightened risk. When they arrived, they tried knocking on the front door, and with no response, the officers decided to go round to the back garden to try to explain why they were there. The police then attempted to talk to occupant Jan Olav Karnengstorp through the door, but when he opened it, he was armed with a large knife, which he held above his head, and aggressively started to shout at them, and he then lunged towards both of the police officers, brandishing the weapon. PC Hannah Jones went on to say, "I could see his aggressive nature and had immediate concerns for our safety. I took a step back to create distance between us, but he came charging towards me and lunged towards me with the knife twice, and I believe that these were real attempts to cause harm." PC Justin Harold went on to say, "I was shocked. It was clear his intent was to harm us by what he said. The way he was holding the knife and them coming towards us. In training, you prepare for situations like this, but you hope they never happen. We are trained to get away at the sight of a knife, so my immediate priority was to create distance. In the time Hannah was distracting him, I wanted her to come out of the contained garden, so was shouting for her to come towards me. Once she did, I drew my parva spray and fired it. He became quickly incapacitated, dropping to the floor, and I think he dropped the knife. It all happened so quickly and could have ended very differently. Recently, it was heard at Swansea Crown Court that at around 12:45 AM on March the 15th, 2020, the two officers went to a property in Greig Avenue, Llanelli, South Wales, following a series of complaints from neighbours in the street about loud music coming from inside the house. Sophie Hill prosecuting said officers repeatedly knocked on the front and rear doors of the address and tried to speak to the occupant, but he did not answer. However, Jan then began shouting and swearing at the police officers from inside the property before bursting through the door into the garden. Miss Hill went on to say he was armed with a kitchen knife around 12 inches long and was shouting, "Let's get this sorted then." It was then heard that he lunged at the police officers, brandishing the knife above his head as if to stab one of the officers. The prosecutors said PC James would later describe him as being in a state of rage. The court heard that the officers retreated, but he followed them, continuing to wave the knife around while shouting about the army. Despite repeated instructions from the officers, he refused to drop the weapon. The prosecution went on to say PC Jones drew for her baton to defend herself, and while she distracted the defendant, her colleague was able to use his parva spray to incapacitate him. He was then disarmed and arrested, and during the journey to Ammanford police station, he started shouting abuse at the officers. Jan admitted a fray, and the court heard that he had one conviction for 3 offences on his record dating back to 2010 and involving him taking his sister's car the day before he took his driving test and crashing it. James Hartson, defending Jan, said it must have been a frightening experience for the officers to find themselves confronted by a man brandishing a knife who was clearly unwell. He said it was clear from a pre-sentence report into the defendant that he'd been going through a breakdown at the time of the incident following a change in medication for his mental health issues. Judge Geraint Walters told Jan that the police officers who had called at his home on the night in question had only been carrying out their jobs. He said the defendant had verbally abused the police officers before charging at them with a knife in what must have been a terrifying experience. The judge went on to say that Jan had long-standing mental health issues which needed addressing, and the question before him was whether to impose an immediate custodial sentence, which the offending deserved, or to follow the recommendations of the probation service and pass a more constructive sentence. Giving the defendant credit for his guilty plea, he sentenced him to an 18-month community order with the rehabilitation required and 200 hours of unpaid work. The judge had told the defendant he could not keep using his mental health problems as an excuse and needed to tackle the underlying issue, adding, "I'm putting you to the test, let me down, and we will meet again and you will get the sentence you deserve." So going back to what I said at the start of the video, would it have been better if the police were armed with some kind of firearm, maybe not an actual gun, but rather a stun gun? In my opinion, I feel like the officers handled the situation pretty well, and in the end it was the mace spray that took the man down. Now of course, a stun gun comes with its problems. For example, it might not actually work, and if it does work, the other problem is it might end up killing the person. So these are things we have to bear in mind when using a stun gun, and the stun gun comes into play. Now of course, to me, not gonna lie, it looked like the man wanted to kill the police officers how he was holding that knife. So I'm surprised the judge was pretty lenient with him, giving him an 18-month community order and not a jail sentence. So he's pretty lucky in this situation because things could have gone left pretty quick and people could have potentially been dead by now. Now I understand that this man was probably angry at police for coming into his property, and he was probably just angry at the police anyway, but does he really need to be coming out with a knife, lunging at police? I don't really think so, and all this over a noise complaint. So think about it, he could potentially be sitting in jail for a murder case right now over a noise complaint. So you just have to put that into perspective. Now again, the man did have mental health issues, and we have briefly discussed mental health in other cases. So again, if you do know anyone with any mental health problems, please seek out the right help for them, because we really don't want them to get injured or anybody else to get injured, because mental health is a real thing. But let me know what you guys think of this in the comment section below. Give the video a little like, and if you want the latest drill, street and music news out of the UK, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. It's been your boy 8Poncho, and I'm out.